In the void between stars, silence isn't just the absence of sound. It is the weight of all things unsaid. Lyora stood on the rim of the ancient observatory, her breath shallow in the brittle mountain air. Her fingers traced the grooves of a shattered star chart, left behind by a father she barely remembered. He mapped the heavens, the villagers used to say, but never found peace beneath them. Now, under a sky sown with 1,000 stars, Lyora felt the hollowness pulse in her chest, an echo of a loss too distant to mourn, yet too close to forget. A sudden gust tugged at her woolen shawl as if the night itself whispered, "Remember." And in that stillness, something stirred. One star blinked. Then, another. Then, 10. As if the cosmos exhaled and turned its gaze upon her. Lyora said, "Why do you watch me now?" But the stars said nothing. Their silence was the answer. Lyora returned to the chart room, its shelves heavy with time. Dust clung to rolled scrolls like forgotten memories. Each parchment was a world once mapped, a thought once dared. Her father's presence lingered in the ink stains and notes scrawled in the margins, curves of forgotten constellations that only he could interpret. She knelt beside the largest map, tracing her finger along a jagged line connecting star systems like fractured bone. "What were you searching for?" she whispered. A rustle overhead, a loose tile shifted. She didn't flinch. The building had become a living echo of her solitude. And yet, despite the quiet, something felt unfinished, as though the stars themselves waited for her to continue what he began. A wind stirred, not from outside but within. One of the scrolls unrolled itself slowly across the stone floor, revealing a star pattern unfamiliar to her. Her breath caught. These were not recorded constellations. She scanned the map, noting its elegance, precision matched with emotion, as if the stars had been drawn mid-weeping. Her father's handwriting trailed alongside the points. "When the stars forget their names, the dreamer will remember," Lyora said. "Then I am the dreamer." A flicker of warmth lit in her chest, and for a moment she imagined his hand guiding hers across the lines. The observatory wasn't empty. It was waiting. She lit a single lantern. The room glowed amber, like memory. Lyora stood and lifted the map, pinning its brittle corners to the central wall. As she stepped back, the constellations shimmered faintly, not from the lantern, but from within the ink itself. She stared, spellbound. Slowly, lines shifted, stars danced, and the wall breathed like the sky. Was this some ancient magic? No, this was intention. Her father hadn't just charted stars, he had composed them, like music in the dark. She placed her palm on the wall, and it pulsed gently, as if to say, "You're not alone." Night fell again, sudden and quiet. Lyora sat beneath the now stirring sky, journal open, quill shaking in her hand. The stars had aligned not by calculation, but by call, and they had called to her. Her first entry read, "I am not mapping stars. I am listening to them." A breeze lifted the pages, brushing her cheeks like a father's farewell. She smiled, soft, uncertain, but no longer hollow. The stars above flickered in response, forming shapes she didn't recognize but felt. The map was changing. And so was she. Morning brought no warmth. Lyora wandered into the outer archives, where her father's tools lay half-buried beneath cracked ledgers and rusted sextants. She picked up a compass, its needle spun wildly, refusing to settle. "Still directionless," she muttered. Every relic whispered a weight she hadn't asked to carry. Each scribble in his journals felt like a challenge. Find what I couldn't. She sat beside a shattered astrolabe, its broken gears glinting like small suns. Her heart ached, not for him, but for the girl she had been before she knew the stars were watching. "I'm not him," she said aloud. The compass needle stilled for a breath, then began spinning again. She returned to the observatory's peak that night, her arms full of salvaged instruments. One by one, she tried to use them, to chart, to measure, to map. But nothing aligned. The stars refused to obey. Each calculation collapsed into nonsense. Her voice cracked. Why did you leave me nothing but riddles? She slammed the quadrant to the ground. Silence. Then, laughter? Her own. Not in a sewing. Oh. Soft, bitter, unraveling. For the first time she saw it. How much of her pain was a desire to prove herself. To be worthy. Of him. Of the stars. Of something unnamed. The constellations blinked above, unbothered, eternal. She whispered, I don't know who I am if I'm not trying to be him. Later, Lyora sat beneath the star map wall again. But this time, she did not seek answers. She simply watched. Let the ink move. Let the stars shift. Patterns emerged, not of logic, but of rhythm. She closed her eyes, listening not with ears but with breath. A story wove itself in silence. She heard her father's voice, not as memory, but as melody. Stars are not to be mastered, Lyora. They are to be heard. She opened her eyes. The constellations pulsed faintly, almost nodding. The anger softened. She placed her hand over her chest. Her pulse and the map were in sync. The stars were not outside her. They were her. A visitor arrived, an old monk from the valley below, wrapped in saffron and silence. He said little, only watched as Lyora showed him the map. Do you see it too? She asked. He nodded once. Then, slowly, he reached into his robe and produced a small crystal lens, placing it in her hand. You seek through broken tools, he said, but not all sight is through glass. Then he left, walking back into the dawn mist. Lyora stared at the lens, flawed, chipped at one corner, but it magnified light in ways no metal could. She turned it toward the stars. Through it, she saw not shape, but movement. Not answers, but presence. That night, Lyora stood alone, holding the lens to the sky. The stars trembled, not from her gaze but in response to her stillness. She no longer chased them. She received them. And in doing so the patterns changed. No longer maps to follow, but mirrors to reflect. Her grief, her pride, her longing, all woven in the firmament. I see you, she said, not to the stars, but to herself. And the heavens brightened. Not because she had solved them, but because she had stopped trying to conquer them. She was not here to complete her father's journey. She was here to walk her own. A storm rolled in, not of wind or rain, but of memory. Lyora discovered a hidden chamber beneath the observatory, its stone door etched with her father's symbol, a star crossed by a single tear. Inside, dust lay thick as silence. She lit her lantern, illuminating wall carvings and journals locked behind time. One book stood out, bound in dark leather and stitched with red thread. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Within, drawings of constellations that did not exist, at least, not in any sky she knew. And beside them, journal entries addressed to her. For the day she seeks her own sky, one read. Lyora whispered, You knew I'd come. She read for hours. Her father's words bled with longing, guilt, and wonder. He had not abandoned her, he had lost himself trying to find meaning in the stars. The further I went, one entry said, the more I realized I was fleeing, not searching. Lyora traced the ink with her fingertip. It was like touching a heartbeat that had stopped years ago. One page held a sketch of her, young, joyful, eyes closed to the sky. Beneath it, she will remember when she sees the stars not as destiny, but as reflection. Her eyes burned. I hated you for leaving, she said aloud. But now, I understand why you couldn't stay. Night bled into dawn. Lyora emerged from the chamber, her hands stained with ink and dust, but her spirit lighter. She climbed to the observatory dome and sat beneath the stars, just beginning to fade in the approaching light. A bird called out. First sound in hours. I am not broken, she said softly. I'm just becoming. She placed the journal beside her. The wind opened it to the page with the sketch. In the pale light it seemed to move, her younger self smiling back at her. "Thank you," she whispered, not to her father, but to the version of herself who had waited all these years to be seen. In her dreams that night, Lyora found herself drifting among stars. But these were not static lights, they pulsed like hearts, each carrying a memory. One drew near. She saw a moment, her father carrying her on his shoulders beneath a dark sky, pointing upward. Another followed, hers a child, tracing stars on parchment with clumsy joy. Then another, his final night at the observatory, staring skyward with tear-streaked cheeks. She reached for him. He did not speak, but in his silence she heard everything. Forgiveness. Regret. Love. Love. She awoke with tears on her pillow, the dream lingering like a soft constellation stitched behind her eyes. Morning light stretched over the valley as Lyora stood atop the observatory with the dream still thrumming inside her. She took the old journal and walked to the edge, letting the breeze lift its pages one last time. Then without hesitation, she placed it in a carved wooden box and buried it beneath the stones at the base of the observatory. "Your story is safe," she said. "But I must write my own now." She stood in silence as the wind carried the scent of moss, old paper and dawn. The stars were gone from the sky, but now, they lived in her. Lyora sat at the edge of a frozen lake below the observatory, where no stars could be seen. Mist hung heavy above the surface, veiling the sky and muting her reflection. She'd come seeking silence, but her thoughts screamed louder than ever. "You are failing. This isn't yours. You don't belong here." The voice was hers, and not hers. A phantom echo of everything she feared. She gripped the lens, trying to calm her breath. But nothing came. The stillness mocked her. For the first time, the stars did not answer. They hid. She said, "Have I lost you? Or have I lost myself?" No reply came. Just the soft creak of ice beneath her. She returned to the observatory and began dismantling it, quietly, deliberately. Scrolls, tools, remnants of her father's life. She unrolled, disassembled, and burned them in the brazier one by one. Each crackle felt like a confession. "I don't want to inherit your weight," she whispered. The flames consumed parchment and ink, turning legacy into ash. But instead of relief, emptiness bloomed. She dropped the last chart in and stepped back, her face lit with dancing embers. "What am I without all this?" she asked the fire. And in its roar, she heard nothing. No stars. No voice. Only herself, and even that felt uncertain now. That night, she dreamt of falling. Not through air, but through herself. Layers peeled away, names, memories, desires, until only silence remained. At the bottom, she stood alone in a dark chamber without walls, without stars. A mirror appeared before her. Inside it, no face. Only shifting light. She reached toward it, and it shattered. Soundless. Endless. The shards did not cut, but dissolved into her skin. She awoke, gasping, drenched in sweat, heart racing as if she had died and returned. The sky outside was moonless. But in that darkness, she realized something vital. She could no longer return to who she had been. That self was gone. She stepped outside just before dawn, barefoot on stone, the cold biting but grounding. No lens, no scroll, no father's shadow. Just breath and earth. The sky above was void, no constellations, no formations, only openness. She whispered, "I am not a map. I am the space between the stars." With nothing left to hold, she sat. And for the first time didn't reach. She just existed. And in that surrender, warmth stirred, not in the sky, but within. Not light, but presence. She smiled faintly. Not because she knew anything, but because she no longer needed to. Later that morning, the first sunbeam crested the peak and fell through the broken dome of the observatory. Dust particles swirled, golden and slow. Lyora walked in slowly, barefoot, skin pale, but eyes aglow. She stood in the very center and raised her gaze upward. No tools, no lens, just vision. The star map wall, now bare, flickered faintly, then dimmed. And still, she smiled. "I see," she said. Not the heavens. Not her father. Herself. The silence held her like a cradle. Not empty, but sacred. Not broken, but open. A quiet echoed through the chamber, not from the stars, but from within. Lyora wandered through the valley for the first time in weeks, her hands empty but her heart strangely full. Villagers paused as she passed. She, the reclusive astronomer's daughter, once distant as the constellations she chased. A child offered her a flower, and she smiled, not out of politeness, but presence. She crouched beside him, eye to eye. "Do you know the stars listen?" she asked. The boy nodded, wide-eyed. "Then speak gently to them," she whispered. He grinned, ran off laughing. For a moment, she didn't feel apart from the world, but of it. Not a seeker above, but a soul among. And that, somehow, felt holier than anything she'd ever mapped. Back at the observatory, Lyora opened the old chest beneath the star window and found a brass lantern her father once used on night walks. She lit it, not to search, but to share. That evening, she hiked a winding trail to a nearby summit, carrying the lantern in one hand, the chipped lens in the other. She placed them both on a flat stone at the cliff's edge. The light flickered gently beside the lens. No longer tools. Symbols. "You served him," she said, "but now you serve stillness." And as she sat beside them, the first star appeared overhead, not summoned, but arriving in its own time. Later that night, she gathered the villagers and children at the observatory for the first time. The great telescope stood silent, but she invited them not to look, but to lie down. "Tonight we listen," she said. They lay shoulder to shoulder, gazing upward. Lyora remained quiet, eyes closed. One child whispered, "I hear them humming." Another giggled. A mother cried softly. And among them all, Lyora finally felt not as a guide but as part of the constellation, woven into the soft tapestry of human breath and starlight. And for the first time, she felt the true map forming, not drawn ink but in presence. As weeks passed, the observatory no longer echoed with solitude. It hummed with quiet voices, laughter, and stories. Lyora taught the children not how to chart stars, but how to feel them. She encouraged sketching constellations based on emotions rather than geometry. "Show me how kindness would look in the sky." One drew spirals. Another, a hand reaching outward. The dome became a sanctuary, not of science but soul. And in the quiet moments after they left, Lyora would look up and whisper not questions, but gratitude. The stars had never belonged to her. But now, she belonged to the sky. One evening, alone again, Lyora climbed to the observatory dome, and sat in silence, lantern unlit. Above, the stars shimmered in their eternal rhythm. She took a breath, not to speak, but to receive. The wind wrapped around her like an old friend. Her father's voice, no longer haunting, now felt like part of the wind itself. She placed a hand on her chest. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the stars. No tools. No legacy. Just now. Just here. Just this. She smiled and whispered, "I'm the lantern." And in that instant, without ceremony or sound, the sky responded, clear, bright, endlessly still. The morning mist hugged the ridgelines as Lyora walked without purpose or path. She followed the wind, letting it choose her direction. Her feet moved like water flowing downhill, soft, quiet, inevitable. Insects buzzed. Birds called. The world did not ask her to map it, it welcomed her into its melody. She stepped barefoot into a shallow stream, the coldness singing against her skin. Kneeling, she cupped the water and drank. No thought. No effort. Just breath and motion. And in that moment she realized she wasn't being guided anymore. She was simply a line. "I am where I am," she whispered. And for once, that was enough. She encountered a wounded fox near a moss-covered clearing, its leg caught in a rusted trap left by long-vanished hunters. It snarled, eyes wide with pain and mistrust. She crouched low, whispering wordless sounds into the air, not to command, but to share calm. The fox paused, trembled, but did not flee. With steady fingers, she loosened the trap. Blood stained her sleeve, but the creature did not bite. It limped free, then paused, and looked back. In its eyes, recognition, not of a savior, but of a being who no longer separated herself from life. "Go well," Lyra whispered. The fox disappeared into the green. As twilight fell, she wandered to a windswept plateau. No village, no dome, just stone and sky. She lay back on the cool earth, arms spread wide, surrendering to gravity. Her thoughts dissolved like mist. She felt her breath in rhythm with the wind, her pulse synchronized with the hush of dusk. From this stillness, a vision bloomed, not of past or future, but of now. The stars above pulsed not as guides, but as mirrors. She saw no map, no lines, just presence, just sky. And it welcomed her not as an explorer, but as kin. "I don't need to arrive," she whispered. "I only need to remain." Later, she met a young traveler, a girl lost in the woods, frightened and tear-streaked. Lyra knelt beside her and asked nothing. She offered no destination, only presence. Together they sat beneath a willow tree, until the child's sobs became silence. "Are you a priestess?" the girl finally asked. Lyra smiled. "No, I'm someone who listens." She walked the girl back to the path and let her go, not with instruction but with faith. Watching her disappear into the trees, Lyra realized her purpose was not to lead, but to accompany. Not to illuminate, but to witness. And sometimes that was enough. That night, alone once more, Lyra lit a single candle atop a flat stone. No observatory. No map. Just flame and sky. She sat beside it and breathed. The stars blinked above like old friends returning, not summoned, just noticed. She did not chart them. She did not name them. She simply let them be. And in that being, they shimmered brighter. Her journey had no goal now, no final truth to chase. Only moments to meet. Only breath to follow. She said nothing. And in that silence, the stars sang, not to her, but with her. The melody was presence. The rhythm, surrender. Time had softened the stones of the observatory. Moss lined the edges of the walls, and ivy crept toward the cracked dome like quiet memory. The seasons no longer felt separate to Lyra. They moved through her, seamless and tender. She no longer observed the world through instruments or translations. She inhabited it. Her breath synchronized with wind, her steps with the arc of the sun. She no longer needed to capture the stars. They visited her naturally, like old friends passing through an open door. In the village, she was no longer the astronomer's daughter. She was the woman who listened, truly listened. When children brought her flowers or drawings, she placed them in the cracks of the old star wall, letting the sacred and the simple coexist. "You don't need to understand the stars," she would say. "Only witness them." Her life had become a living map, written not in ink, but in kindness, presence and stillness. One evening, she sat with an elder from the valley, his hands weathered like bark, his eyes heavy with years. They spoke little. He simply asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" Lyra thought, then answered, "I stopped looking." He nodded slowly, tears brimming without falling. "Then you've seen." Together they watched the stars rise, no ceremony, no need for words. The silence between them was full. Lyra didn't explain. She didn't translate the sky for him. Instead, she listened to the quiet growing between his breaths. And in that stillness both of them felt it, not knowledge but peace. One night she dreamt again, this time not of stars, but of space between them. It wasn't empty. It was vast, soft, holding all things that had ever been. She floated there, not separate from the stars, but from the need to define them. A voice, not her father's, not her own, rose gently. You are not here to finish a journey. You are the pause between steps. And in that moment she understood. Enlightenment was not ascent. It was stillness. The freedom to no longer climb. She awoke before dawn, heart quiet, hands folded in her lap. The sky outside held a single star pulsing like breath. On her final night atop the observatory, Lyora carried no tools, no lens, no journal. She simply wore her shawl, now threadbare but warm. She sat at the dome's center, breathing slowly. Above her the stars gathered, not to be charted but to witness. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. The stars blinked like knowing eyes, and the night wind curled gently around her. She didn't feel awe. She felt belonging. The universe was not above her. It was within her, around her, of her. Let this moment be my map, she thought. And in that thought, everything became still. The next morning, the observatory stood empty. Not abandoned, but complete. Inside, a single scroll lay on a stone pedestal. Not a chart. Not a guide. Just a single line of ink across blank parchment. Unbroken. Unending. Beneath it, Lyora's final note. The stars do not ask to be named, they ask only to be seen. Outside, the wind moved gently over the stones. No one knew where she went. But on cloudless nights when the valley falls quiet, some say they hear her laugh, light as stardust. And above, the constellations shift slightly, as if leaning closer, as if listening.